You know, there have to be about 1 million YouTube videos telling you how to be happier, why to be happier, 5 simple tricks to become happier. Well, I'm here to tell you that I don't want to be happy. And here's why. Now, you might think this is some clickbait or some, surprise video where at the end I tell you that, oh, of course I want to be happy because everyone wants to be happy because that's the meaning of life, apparently. But for me, it isn't. In fact, I don't think happiness is really a goal that any of us should be striving for. Let me give you an example. What happens when you chase happiness? What happens when you make happiness like the North Star of your life, the thing that you are heading towards? The whole point of your journey, the whole point of your life is to be happy. Well, I used to live in a city called Vancouver, and in Vancouver there's an area called the Downtown East Side. And this neighborhood has the worst drug addiction problem in Canada. It's very shocking because you're in downtown, you're in a rich city, in a prosperous part of Canada, and you get there and there's like used needles on the ground from people injecting heroin and fentanyl and all these other illegal drugs that make them happy. So happy, in fact, that some of these people have resorted to a life of crime where every day they're stealing to get their fix. Some people have left jobs, some people have left family, some people have left everything that was once important to them in the name of being happy. And you might think that's a very extreme example. You might think that's kind of an unrealistic example because how many of us end up being heroin addicts? But I would argue that it's more common than you think. I would argue that there's a lot of people out there overeating sweets because for the moment that you eat those sweets, that you eat those cookies, that you eat those brownies, it makes you feel very happy. I would argue that there's a lot of people out there overusing video games or even pornography and stuff like that because for a moment or a few moments, it makes you feel very happy. But afterwards, you might feel like that guy in East Hastings Street who is only thinking about how to get the next fix. That is where the life of chasing happiness takes you. Now the question this raises, an obvious question, is if you're not going to chase happiness, what are you going to chase? Because we've all been taught from a young age that we all want to be happy. And this is deliberate. I mean, think of Disneyland. It's the happiest place on earth. That's what they tell you, right? The happiest place on earth. Not the most meaningful place on earth. Not the most noble place on earth. It's the happiest. Because everyone wants to be happy, right? But what they don't tell you in that slogan is they're actually just taking your money so you can go hang out with a bunch of people dressed in giant mouse costumes and go down a roller coaster. And I've been to Disneyland when I was a kid, and I have fond memories, maybe not of the mouse, but the roller coaster and Space Mountain was awesome. I'm not knocking Disneyland, but I am knocking the idea that your whole life, your whole journey, the whole point is to get to Disneyland. Because Disneyland is just, a few days or even a day. It's just a short visit and then it's over. And what do you do with the rest of your time? Other than going back to a job you don't like, and a living situation you don't like, and a house and a car you can barely afford, just as you try to save up for the next trip to Disneyland. That is not a life. That is a journey that's not so different than the drug addicts, or the gambling addicts, or the eating addicts, or the gaming addicts who are just trying to get to the next fix. And this is how so many of us live our lives. And this is why I think this whole culture, this whole idea that we want to be happy is fundamentally flawed. And I don't hear enough people talking about this. Even on YouTube, which is kind of an independent form of media, advertising is still how this whole game works. We're kind of afraid, I don't know if people are afraid or they just haven't thought it through enough, but for me, it kind of seems like there's some fear involved because, okay, if you tell people you don't need to buy things to be happy, well, the sponsors at the end of the YouTube videos, the Squarespaces of the world, the audibles.com, whoever might reach out to me and say, hey, Dan, like there was some electric toothbrush company that wanted me to promote their toothbrush in a video recently. I politely declined. And not because it didn't look like a cool toothbrush. I mean, it kind of did. But at the end of the day, like, I'm fine with the toothbrush I have. And I don't think this thing is worth $150. I don't think it's going to make you happier. So I've been on this journey where I realize you don't actually need products to make you happier. You don't need purchases to make you happier. Some people would say the happiness has to come from within. I'll go a step further. I don't even think you want happiness. I think you want fulfillment. Which for some people might sound like a synonym for happiness. It might just sound like, oh, you're just tricking us and coming up with a different word for happiness. No, not at all. Not at all. Fulfillment is a very different thing. And I know that right now because I'm writing a book. And I've been writing this book for over a year, actually. It's ridiculous how many hours I've spent on this book, how many revisions, how many new pages, how many tens of thousands of words I've thrown out. As I change the idea, as I become closer and closer to what I actually want it to be. I'm not happy as I do that work. In fact, sometimes I'm deeply unhappy. Like today, I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I was dreading sitting down at the computer. I was actually like terrified of facing my own mind and putting in the time and the effort to write. But I had to. Not because it makes me happy, but because it will one day make me fulfilled when this book is done, when it's published. And when it's something I can actually be proud of, like something that if I have grandkids one day, I'll be like, hey, Grandpa Dan, I didn't make a lot of money. I didn't become president of the universe, but I wrote this. And maybe you can read it and maybe you can like it. And maybe that'll inspire you to find some fulfillment of your own. Actually, that just reminded me. Yeah, where could it be? Where could it be? I found it. This was my great-grandfather, a man I never met. He died before I was born. And Joseph kept a diary or a journal or something, like all through his life. Like, look at this. 1935, 1934. Look at that, 1935. Fascism, Nazism stand for anti-Semitism. 1958, truth. Truth is the acceptance by rational people because it expresses basic principles that can stand the test of proof irrespective of time. The Universe, 1960. This guy was a deep thinker, man. I'm telling you. I wish I'd known him. My dad compiled this. My dad's retired now, so he went through his grandfather's old notes, my great-grandfather's notes, and he compiled this book. Just for our family, just as something to have a trace to the past, a trace to the previous generation. And I'll tell you, I bet it was hard work compiling this. Because first of all, it's not easy reading someone else's handwriting. It's not easy transcribing that and compiling it and organizing it and figuring out how to publish it and figuring out, it's not easy to do any of that. Probably doesn't make you happy as you're typing away, as you're squinting your eyes trying to figure out what the words say. Maybe it doesn't make you happy, but maybe it does something better than that. Maybe it makes you fulfilled when the work is done. Or even as you're doing it in anticipation of the fact that it will be done. Like that's the other thing. When I'm writing my book, it's not like, I wouldn't describe it as happy, but there's a fire inside you sometimes. Sometimes you're writing and like an hour or 2 hours pass and you're like, where did the time go? I don't know. But in some ways, I sleep the best when I have days like that. The days when I'm unhappy and like stressed about my book, if I at least know I got good work done, when I go to bed, I'm like, I'm out. Like I don't have any trouble sleeping after a day of writing. I'm exhausted. But I don't feel happy. I feel fulfilled because I feel like I'm on the path and I'm doing something valuable. And we don't teach that message. We don't teach that message to many people these days. We're a society that puts so much focus on consumerism, the things we should buy, the things that should bring us quick pleasure, quick hits, quick dopamine hits of happiness. But the long-term rewards, the long-term fulfillment that comes from being unhappy and not making happiness your priority can be a lot more valuable. A lot more meaningful. Disneyland's the happiest place on earth. What's the most meaningful place? I don't know. But I don't think it's somewhere you need to spend a lot of money or take a selfie with a giant mouse. I'm being too hard on Disneyland. I'll lay off Disneyland for the rest of the video, but happiness, like what? Why do we want to be happy? Is it just the fact that like people don't know what else to do? Is it just people who haven't found that fulfillment or that meaningful thing to chase, who are just like, well, I guess I'll eat some more cookies. I guess I'll be happy for the moment. I don't know, man. I don't know. But I'll tell you what I do know. There's a quote we sometimes hear from old people, like, no one on their deathbed ever said, well, I didn't work enough. People on their deathbed are always like, I wish I'd spent more time with family. Wish I'd spent more time with friends. I wish I'd been happier. And, as someone who's like, still in the first half of my life, hopefully, someone who's still relatively young, I guess I understand that perspective, but I think it can also be misleading. Because those people are already done. Like if someone's 88 years old and they're about to die, of course they don't want to work now. Now they're like, well, I don't need to work anymore. And of course when they think back on their work, it might have been stressful. But was it meaningful? Did the people who regret all of that work, were they maybe like working on the wrong thing? Did they ever ask themselves if there was a chance to do something more meaningful? Maybe they didn't have the chance because it didn't exist in their generation. They didn't have YouTube. They didn't have, online courses you can take and online information you can find, or they just didn't have the privilege of growing up somewhere with the luxury of having enough free time to think about these things. But I do, and if you're watching this video, you probably do too. It might seem like a lot to ask if you're midway through a career or you're at a later point in your life to suddenly choose to choose something more meaningful. But really, it's the only path there is. If you accept my premise that you don't want to be stuck on East Hastings Street with a needle in your arm, or you don't want to be like just buried under a pile of cookies that you can't stop eating, then you need to accept that there's something else other than that out there. Maybe for some people, it doesn't have to be a book. Of course, I'm a writer, so I went right to the book example, but it could be your family. Having a family you love and care about, that's also meaningful. But family doesn't make you happy all the time. At least mine didn't. But chances are yours didn't too, because people are complicated. People have problems. That's what life is. There will always be more problems. And if you're only chasing happiness, the problems will continue to bother you and to disrupt your happiness. The people I admire the most these days, one of them is Elon Musk, the guy who's literally trying to bring the humans to Mars. You think it makes him happy going to work every day and putting in 18-hour days and worrying about things like astrophysics? Don't you think if he was chasing happiness, he would have just thought, well, maybe a government should be the one doing this. Maybe the government should make the space program, and me, the random billionaire, maybe I should just go off on my yacht and go to the French Riviera and be happy. But he doesn't want to be happy. He wants to do something meaningful that fulfills you. And that takes a task which is not only big, but in some ways bigger than it seems possible to accomplish. Like getting to Mars is so big, it seems like, I don't know if this can actually happen. And my book feels that way sometimes too. And maybe when my great-grandpa was writing this, maybe he thought, the idea of these notes ever making a book, maybe that seemed impossible too. Of course, it took my dad, 2 generations later to actually publish it. Hopefully my book doesn't take that long. But maybe it'll take 2 generations for us to actually have like a city on Mars. Like maybe that vision Elon Musk has will take more time than we can even imagine. And if he does, and if Elon dies without ever seeing that city, and if we all die too, we might not die happy. But if we see the path, if we see the vision that's so much greater than us, and we see what the point was, maybe we'll die fulfilled. And maybe that'll be worth something more than just chasing happiness. So you know what? You can like this video if you want. You can share it if you want. But I don't care, because I'm not chasing happiness. Give me a thumbs down. I don't care. Your thumb decisions will not affect my happiness. Because I'm fulfilled that I even made this video. I'm fulfilled that for once, I decided to turn on my camera and just ramble about something real to me. The people I respect the most always keep it real. And in 2021 and moving forward, that's what I'm going to try and do more than anything else. It might not reach as many people, but if this video can convince even one person to re-examine their life and re-examine if what they're doing is chasing fulfillment in something deeper and more meaningful, or just happiness in something temporary, then I'll be happy. No, I'll be fulfilled. Oh, I just ruined my whole video by saying I'll be happy. You see, it's such a cliche. It's on the tip of our tongue. Oh, that'll make me so happy. Oh, that'll make me so, that'll make me, jumping with joy. Like we can't avoid it. We've been so brainwashed by happiness. I'm not telling you guys it's not okay to get a cookie every once in a while. And I'm not telling you if you haven't worked hard, don't take your kids to Disneyland. For the kids, a bit of happiness is probably a good idea. You can be a workaholic and you can go too far in the other direction as well. But generally, I don't think that's the problem we have. Generally, I think we're going too far in the direction of happiness. And it's preventing a lot of us from tackling the big problems that the world is faced with today. Because there's not enough people out there who are willing to be unhappy in the search for fulfillment, in the search for a better life, and in the search for a better future for all of us. All right, that's all I got today. Thanks for watching. Peace.